This is my true story. I gave my son everything: a roof, an education, and a future I never had. I thought when I grew weak, he would give me love and respect in return. But one afternoon, when I asked for his help, he pushed me hard into the dirt. My body trembled as I lay on the ground, clothes stained, while he stood above me laughing. That laugh broke something inside me. But I was not powerless. You won't believe what I did next. Before that, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. And please subscribe so my story can reach more people. A father's life is built on sacrifice. From the first day my son was born, I told myself I would give him everything I never had. I grew up poor, working in fields and factories, saving every coin, fighting to survive. But I wanted his life to be different. I wanted him to walk into the world with pride, not shame. So every morning I woke before the sun, and every night I returned home long after dark, my body aching but my heart filled with hope. I remember the small days, when he was only a boy. His little hands would reach for mine, and I would lift him onto my shoulders so he could see the world higher than his height. Even when I had holes in my shoes, I made sure his shoes were new. Even when my stomach growled with hunger, I made sure his plate was full. His happiness was my happiness. His smile was the reward for every drop of sweat that ran down my face. As he grew, the sacrifices grew too. School fees came, and they were heavy, but I paid them without hesitation. I worked extra shifts, carried loads heavier than my own strength, and gave up comforts so he could sit in classrooms and learn. When he wanted books, I bought them. When he wanted new clothes, I found a way. When he wanted to play while I needed rest, I still gave him my time. I told myself this was what fathers do. We give, and we never count the cost. When he became a young man, the expenses did not stop. He wanted to marry, and I paid for his wedding. I stood proudly, watching him promise a new life to his bride, knowing that everything around him, the hall, the food, the music, had come from my savings. Even when he fell into debt, I cleared it quietly. I told him, "Don't worry, son. Your father will take care of it," and I did. Every time trouble came, I stood in front of it, shielding him. I built the house he lived in with my bare hands. Brick by brick, wall by wall, I raised it with my labor. That roof above his head was not a gift from the sky. It was my sweat, my pain, my endless hours of work. And when he slept safely inside, I told myself it was worth it. Because I thought one day, when I was old, he would let me rest under the same roof with dignity. I denied myself many things so he could have more. I did not buy new clothes when mine grew thin. I did not eat in restaurants. I did not travel or enjoy luxuries. Every coin I held, I thought of him first. Every dream I had, I placed it aside so his dreams could rise higher. My life became less about me and more about him. That is the truth of a father's heart. It beats for the child before it beats for itself. Even when my body grew weaker, I kept giving. Even when my back ached and my hands trembled, I still put him first. And deep inside, I believed the same thing again and again. One day, when I cannot stand tall, he will hold me. One day, when I cannot walk steady, he will guide me. One day, when I am too tired to cook or clean, he will place a plate in front of me and say, "Eat, Father. You cared for me. Now I care for you." That was the dream that kept me alive through all the years of sacrifice. I thought love would return love. I thought respect would return respect. I thought giving everything would mean I would never feel empty. But I was wrong. All those years of sacrifice became nothing in his eyes. He did not look at me with gratitude. He did not see my old age as a time to honor me. Instead, he saw weakness. He saw a burden. He saw someone to mock, someone to push into the dirt. And that is why the betrayal cut so deep. Because the sacrifice was not small. It was my whole life, and the hand that pushed me into the dirt was the same hand I once held to keep him from falling. Cruelty does not begin in one moment. It grows slowly, like a shadow that stretches longer every day. At first, I did not see it for what it was. I told myself my son was tired, stressed, or simply having a bad day. But over time, I realized those excuses were lies I told myself because I did not want to believe my own child could turn against me. The first signs were small, but they carried poison. When I walked slowly, he mocked me, saying, "Look at you, old man, can't even move straight." His words were sharp, but I laughed nervously, trying to hide the sting. When my hands trembled while holding a cup, he shook his head and muttered, "So useless." I told myself not to take it to heart. I thought love would return. But the love I waited for never came. Instead, the insults grew louder. When I sat in a chair, resting my tired bones, he would sigh and say, "All you do is sit around. You're just a burden." When I coughed at night, he banged the wall and shouted, "Stop making noise! Let me sleep!" My heart cracked each time, but I stayed silent. I swallowed the pain, hoping his heart would soften. Even in front of others, his respect vanished. At family gatherings, he no longer introduced me with pride. Instead, he made jokes at my expense. "My father eats too much," he would laugh while his friends joined in. I sat quietly, pretending I did not hear, but my chest burned. The people who once looked at me with admiration now looked at me with pity. Meals became another stage for his cruelty. The portions on my plate grew smaller, while his plate stayed full. When I asked politely for a little more, he glared at me and said, "You should be thankful you're getting anything at all." Thankful? For the food I paid for? For the meals cooked under the roof I built? That sentence pierced deeper than hunger. It told me he no longer saw me as his father, but as a beggar. Day by day, the cruelty grew sharper. It was not only words. It was the look in his eyes, full of annoyance instead of respect. When I asked for small help, like fixing something or walking with me, he rolled his eyes as if my needs were too heavy for him. I was not asking for riches. I was asking for care. But even that, he refused. His wife joined the silence too. She did not stop him. Sometimes she even smirked when he mocked me. I felt alone in my own house, the very house I built. The walls that once carried laughter now carried insults. The air that once felt warm now felt heavy. And yet, I endured it. Because I told myself, maybe tomorrow he will change. Maybe tomorrow he will remember the father who gave him everything. But tomorrow never came. The small signs grew into bigger ones. The words became commands. The disrespect became open humiliation. And slowly, I realized the son I raised with love was turning into a man who took pleasure in my weakness. I should have acted sooner, but I stayed silent, believing patience would heal him. Instead, patience only gave him more space to grow cruel. Looking back now, I see that the first signs of cruelty were warnings. But I ignored them because my heart still carried love for him. That love blinded me. And because I ignored the early signs, I ended up face down in the dirt, listening to his laughter. The day it happened is carved into my memory like a scar that will never fade. It was late afternoon, the sun was low, and I was sitting outside in the yard. My legs were tired, my back was weak, but the fresh air gave me a little peace. I asked my son to help me with something simple, to bring me a glass of water. A small request, nothing more. But instead of kindness, his face twisted with anger. He walked toward me, his steps heavy, his eyes cold. Before I could understand, he shoved me hard with both hands. My frail body could not resist. I stumbled, my legs gave way, and I fell into the dirt. The ground hit me hard. My knees scraped against the stones, my hands tried to catch me, but they shook too much to stop the fall. My face almost touched the soil. I lay there, my chest heaving, dust covering my clothes. And then came the sound that cut deeper than the fall, his laugh. He stood above me, laughing at my pain, his voice sharp and cruel. "Stay down, old man," he said. "That's where you belong." Those words burned into my heart. They were not just words. They were proof. Proof that the boy I once carried on my shoulders now enjoyed seeing me on the ground. Proof that the son I once lifted up now wanted me down. The dirt clung to my skin. My hands trembled as I tried to push myself up. My body ached. But the pain was not only in my bones, it was in my soul. I remembered the times when he was small, and I held his hand so he would not fall. I remembered teaching him how to walk, steadying him when his legs were weak. And now, those same hands that once reached for mine had shoved me into the dirt. I looked up at him, hoping to see a trace of shame, a flicker of regret. But all I saw was amusement. He laughed again, shook his head, and walked away as if I were nothing. His wife stood by the door, watching, not with shock, not with care, but with silence. That silence was another wound. No one helped me. No one reached for me. I was left alone in the dirt, a father humiliated in his own yard. I stayed there for a while, too weak to rise, too broken to move quickly. The ground beneath me felt colder than ever before. I whispered to myself, "Is this what my life has become? Is this the reward for all my years of sacrifice?" Tears mixed with the dust on my face. My clothes were stained, my dignity crushed, and my heart shattered. That cruel act was more than just a push. It was a declaration. It was his way of saying I no longer mattered. It was his way of showing me that in his eyes, I was not a father, not a man, but a burden to be thrown aside. But as I lay there, something else began to grow inside me. The humiliation was sharp, but behind it, a seed of strength started to rise. Because in that dirt, I realized something important. He thought I was powerless. He thought pushing me down erased my dignity. He thought his laugh was the final word. But he forgot the truth. He forgot that the man in the dirt was still the man who owned his future. I sat in the dirt longer than I should have. My body trembled, my knees stung, and my clothes were covered with dust. But the worst pain was not on my skin. The worst pain was in my heart. I looked at my hands, shaking as they pressed against the ground, and I felt like life had come full circle in the cruelest way. Once, those same hands carried him gently so he would not fall. Now they struggled to lift me after he had pushed me down. The humiliation was not loud, it was silent. No shouting, no fight, no defense. Just me, an old man, lying in the dirt while my son walked away laughing. I could still hear the sound of that laugh in my ears. It echoed again and again, sharper than any wound, heavier than any weight. That laugh told me everything I needed to know. He enjoyed my pain. My weakness was entertainment to him. My suffering was his joke. I looked at the ground beneath me. The soil was cold, rough, and filled with small stones that pressed into my knees. My palms were scratched, my back ached, but I did not cry out. I sat there in silence, staring at the dirt, remembering another time. I remembered when he was little, running in the same yard. He stumbled once, and before he hit the ground, I rushed to him, held him close, brushed the dirt off his knees, and said, "Don't cry, son, your father is here." That memory pierced through me like a knife, because now, years later, he was the one who had pushed me down, and instead of lifting me, he laughed. Neighbors might have seen. Maybe they looked through windows, maybe they heard the noise. I imagined what they thought. The old man in the dirt, the son walking away with pride. Shame filled my chest, not because I fell, but because I had raised the man who shoved me. The humiliation was not only in my body, it was in the truth that my own blood, the boy I once sacrificed everything for, had turned against me without pity. I stayed quiet. I did not shout for help. I did not call his name. I pushed myself slowly to my feet, my legs shaking under my weight. My clothes were dirty, my dignity crushed. But I stood anyway. I brushed the dust from my shirt, though it left stains that could not be removed. And I walked back inside, each step heavy, each breath filled with pain. When I reached my room, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor. My knees throbbed, my hands burned, but my chest ached the most. The silence of the house pressed down on me. He was laughing with his wife somewhere else, as if nothing had happened. Their voices floated through the air, carefree, heartless, while I sat alone with the weight of betrayal. I thought of speaking up. I thought of telling him how deeply he had hurt me. But what good would words do? A man who could push his father into the dirt and laugh would not listen. My silence became my shield. I let the pain settle inside me, but I also let it shape something else. Resolve. Humiliation can break a man, but it can also awaken him. In that silence, I realized I had been blind for too long. I had ignored the small insults, the mocking, the cold looks, believing love would return one day. But that day never came. That shove into the dirt was the truth, clear and sharp. My son did not love me. My son did not respect me. My son only saw weakness, and he enjoyed it. That realization was heavier than the fall, but it was also freeing. Because in that moment, sitting quietly in my room with dust still clinging to my clothes, I told myself something I had never told myself before. Enough. Enough of silence that protects cruelty. Enough of forgiveness that feeds disrespect. Enough of giving everything and receiving nothing but humiliation. The humiliation was silent, yes. But silence does not mean defeat. It means preparation. And that night, I prepared in my heart. He thought I was finished, broken, powerless. But he was wrong. My silence was not weakness. It was the calm before my storm. My son believed that pushing me into the dirt had stripped away my dignity forever. He thought my silence was surrender. He thought my weakness meant he had won. But he forgot something very important. Power does not always sit in muscles or in laughter. Real power sits quietly in places people forget to look. Yes, my body was weak. My steps were slow. My voice shook when I spoke. But what he did not remember was that every paper, every deed, every bank account, every legal tie to his future was still under my name. The house he walked proudly through, the land he showed off to others, the money he spent without thought, all of it still belonged to me. He thought because I was old, I had no control. But the truth was, I was the one holding everything. I looked around the walls of the house, and I whispered to myself, "This is still mine. He may live here, but I built it. He may call it his, but the papers say otherwise." I opened the drawer where my documents lay safe. Property deeds, bank passbooks, account numbers, the will, all in my handwriting, all under my authority. With one decision, I could erase him. With one stroke of my pen, I could take everything back. He had forgotten the power of the father who raised him. He thought age meant weakness. But he did not know that age also means wisdom, and wisdom is stronger than arrogance. While he laughed at me lying in the dirt, I was already planning. While he thought I was broken, I was already remembering the keys I still held. I thought of the years I carried him, fed him, protected him. He thought those things gave him a right to rule over me now. But in truth, those things gave me the right to decide his future. He had not earned the life he lived. It was given to him, by me. And just as I gave it, I could take it away. That realization gave me strength I had not felt in years. My body was still weak, but my mind stood tall. I understood that the dirt on my clothes did not matter. The laughter in his mouth did not matter. What mattered was the truth. He was still tied to me. His comfort, his pride, his so-called power, all of it still depended on me. And if I cut the rope, he would fall harder than I ever did. I stayed silent for days, watching him walk with arrogance, watching him laugh as if nothing had happened. He thought he had won, but in my silence, I held a secret. I had not lost anything. He had. Because by pushing me into the dirt, he had pushed away the last of my patience. He had pushed away the last of my forgiveness. And now, I was ready to push back. Not with my hands, not with anger, but with the quiet power he had forgotten I possessed. The power of a father is not always seen. Sometimes it lies hidden in the bank. Sometimes it rests in the will. Sometimes it waits in the heart until the right moment. My son forgot that, and soon he would remember in the hardest way possible. That night, as I lay on my bed with my knees sore and my body aching from the fall, I made a decision. The dirt on my clothes could be brushed away, but the dirt on my heart could not. His laughter echoed in my ears, cruel and sharp, and I knew then that something inside me had broken forever. The father in me, the one who kept forgiving, the one who kept hoping, had finally died. What was left was a man who wanted justice, a man who wanted peace, a man who would no longer be silent. I stared at the ceiling, thinking of all the years I had given him. Every coin, every drop of sweat, every hour of labor, all of it was for him. And yet, he had taken my sacrifices and turned them into weapons against me. He used my weakness as his strength. He used my old age as his excuse to mock me. He thought his laugh was power. But I knew better. True power was still in my hands, hidden in the papers, the deeds, the accounts, the will. So I made the decision. He would lose it all. He would lose not just money, not just property, not just comfort. He would lose the future he thought was guaranteed. He would lose his place in my will. He would lose the name he carried with pride. He would lose everything that connected him to me. He would stand alone, stripped of the bloodline he disrespected, stripped of the legacy he never deserved. The decision was not made in anger. It was made in clarity. Anger fades, but clarity lasts. I saw the truth at last. He was not going to change. He was not going to love me, respect me, or honor me. If I stayed silent, he would keep pushing, keep laughing, keep humiliating me until my last breath. But I refused to let my story end that way. I refused to let my name die in disgrace. I told myself, tomorrow I will act. Tomorrow I will go to the lawyer. Tomorrow I will go to the bank. Tomorrow I will make the changes that will cut him out of my life forever. And tomorrow, when he realizes what I have done, he will know that the push he gave me into the dirt was the push that cost him his future. My tears dried as I repeated these words in my heart. The sadness turned into steel. My weakness turned into strength. I no longer felt like a man broken. I felt like a man ready to rise. The dirt he shoved me into would become the soil where my justice grew. That night, I did not sleep much. But I did not need sleep. I had something stronger: resolve. For the first time in years, I felt clear. I felt free. The decision had been made, and nothing could turn me back. The next morning, I woke with a new strength inside me. My body was still weak, my knees still sore from the dirt, but my heart was steady. I knew exactly what I had to do. This was not a day for silence anymore. This was the day for action. My son thought he had buried me in humiliation, but today I would bury his future with my pen. I put on my old coat, gathered my documents, and walked out of the house. Each step was heavy, but each step carried purpose. I did not look back at the walls that once gave me shelter, because I knew soon they would no longer belong to him. I walked slowly, but in my mind I was already moving faster than him. My first stop was the bank. I walked to the counter, greeted the clerk, and handed her my papers. She looked at my name on the accounts, and I saw respect in her eyes. It reminded me of the truth. Everything was still under my control. I told her to transfer the money. Every cent, every balance, every saving that had my name tied to his life, gone from his reach. I moved it into accounts only I could touch. I signed the forms carefully, my hand shaking but firm. With each signature, I felt lighter. With each stamp, I felt stronger. By the time I left the bank, his wealth was no longer his. His pride had been emptied, just like his accounts. From the bank, I went to my lawyer. He welcomed me in, surprised at my sudden visit. I placed the deeds, the will, and my request on his desk. "Cut him out," I said with a voice that did not shake. He asked if I was certain, and I answered, "More certain than anything in my life." Together we rewrote the will. His name was erased, his rights were removed. The house, the land, the money, the inheritance, all redirected. Some went to charities, some to neighbors who had shown kindness, some to relatives who had treated me with respect. My son was left with nothing. He thought the house was his. He thought the land was his. He thought the future was his. But with the lawyer's pen, it was all taken away. I also told my lawyer to prepare documents to remove his claim to the family name. That name, which I had carried with dignity all my life, would not pass to him. I would rather see it end than see it stained by cruelty. The lawyer nodded, prepared the papers, and I signed them with steady hands. With that, his tie to me was broken. No inheritance, no future, no name. But I was not finished. I went to the police station. I walked in slowly, explained what had happened, the push, the dirt, the humiliation, the laughter. I showed the bruises on my knees, the scratches on my hands. The officer wrote it down, nodded, and assured me action would be taken. Elder abuse, they called it. A crime. My son, who thought he could push me without consequence, would now face the law. When I left the station, the sun was setting, but my heart felt bright. For the first time in years, I felt free. I had executed my plan step by step. The bank was empty. The will was rewritten. The name was cut. The law was watching. My son, who laughed at me in the dirt, had no idea his own ground had been taken away. That evening, when I returned home, he looked at me as if nothing had changed. He laughed, he boasted, he carried himself with arrogance. But I stayed silent, calm, knowing the truth. His pride was already gone. He just did not know it yet. The fallout came sooner than I expected. Only days after I made the changes, the cracks in his world began to show. It started with the bank. He went there, as he always did, confident, expecting to withdraw money for his daily pleasures. But instead of wealth, he was met with shock. His accounts were empty. The clerk told him politely that the money had been transferred. His face, I was told later, turned pale. The man who once laughed as I lay in the dirt now stood at the counter with nothing in his hands. When he came home that evening, his anger filled the air. He shouted at his wife, accusing her, blaming her, trying to make sense of the loss. He stormed into my room, his face red with rage. "What happened to the money?" he demanded. I sat calmly, looking at him with steady eyes. I gave him no answer. My silence was my shield. My silence was my victory. The louder he shouted, the more powerful my silence became. The next blow came from the lawyer. My son called him, desperate to confirm that at least the inheritance was safe. But the lawyer told him the truth. His name was gone. The will was rewritten. The properties, the house, the land, all reassigned. He had no claim left. The future he had bragged about to his friends, the pride he carried in his voice when he spoke of his inheritance, was gone in a moment. The lawyer's words cut deeper than any wound. "You are no longer listed." Then came the weight of the law. A letter arrived at our door, a notice of investigation. Elder abuse. My son's face froze as he read it. His arrogance turned to fear. For the first time, he realized there were consequences. He looked at me, his mouth open, his eyes wide. But I said nothing. The law would speak for me. The neighbors noticed the change. They saw the police car outside. They whispered among themselves. The same people who once envied him now pitied him. The son who had pushed his father into the dirt was now the one drowning in disgrace. His pride had become his punishment. His laughter had become his shame. His friends pulled away too. The ones who once sat with him, laughing at his cruel jokes, no longer answered his calls. They wanted no part in his downfall. They saw him for what he truly was, a man who betrayed his own father. His phone that once rang with invitations now stayed silent. He was alone. And then came the most desperate sign of all. My phone began to light up. First one call, then another, then another. He wanted to beg, to explain, to plead for forgiveness. But I did not answer. The calls kept coming. 10, 15, 20. By the end of the night, there were 42 missed calls on my screen. 42 silent cries from the same man who once stood above me, laughing in the dirt. Each missed call was justice. Each unanswered ring was a reminder that I had taken back my power. The same hands he used to push me down were now trembling, dialing again and again, desperate for mercy. But mercy had already been buried in the dirt the day he shoved me there. The fallout was complete. His money was gone. His inheritance was erased. His name was cut. His pride was shattered. His respect in the community had vanished. And I? I sat quietly, eating with dignity, living with peace. I did not need to shout. I did not need to fight. I simply let the world show him what cruelty costs. The aftermath was a different kind of silence. Not the silence of humiliation I once carried, but the silence of justice. The house that used to echo with his loud voice and arrogant laughter now felt empty. He walked slower, no longer proud, no longer boasting. The man who once shoved me into the dirt now looked as if he carried the weight of the whole world on his shoulders. I watched him from a distance. He sat alone more often, staring at his phone, waiting for calls that never came. He tried again and again to reach me, but I did not pick up. 42 missed calls told the story better than words ever could. Each unanswered ring was my revenge. Each silence was a mirror of the silence he gave me when I lay in the dirt. Now he knew how it felt, to cry out and be ignored. Bills began to pile up on the table. Without the money, without the inheritance, without my name, his world started to collapse. Debts that I once cleared for him now returned, heavier than before. The luxuries he was used to slipped away one by one. First, the comfort of spending freely, then the respect of neighbors, then the company of friends. His pride melted like ice under the sun, leaving only desperation. And me? I lived in peace. I ate in dignity, no longer looking over my shoulder, no longer begging for scraps at his table. I rose each morning with a calm heart. My meals tasted sweeter, not because of the food, but because of the freedom that came with them. I no longer felt the sting of humiliation. I no longer carried the shame of silence. I had acted, and my action had given me back my life. The aftermath taught me something important. Cruelty may look strong in the moment, but it always breaks in the end. Respect is stronger than force. Love is stronger than arrogance. And silence, when used at the right time, can be more powerful than any shout. My son thought he controlled me when he shoved me down. But in truth, that shove only awakened me. It gave me the strength to rise higher than he ever imagined. Sometimes I sit alone and think about the past. I remember the little boy who once held my hand so he wouldn't fall. I remember the smile that once brought me joy. And for a moment, I feel sadness. But then I remember the man who laughed at me in the dirt, the man who mocked my weakness, the man who thought I was powerless. And the sadness disappears, replaced with peace. Because I know I did what had to be done. The aftermath was not about revenge alone. It was about dignity. It was about reclaiming the respect I had lost. And when I look at him now, broken, begging, calling with no answer, I know that my silence gave me justice. Justice came to me not with noise, but with silence. I did not raise my hand like he did. I did not shout like he did. I did not laugh at his pain like he once laughed at mine. Instead, I chose a different road, the road of law, of legacy, and of quiet power. My son thought his push into the dirt would leave me broken. But in truth, it only pushed me towards strength I had forgotten I still carried. I cut him out completely. I erased his name from the will. I emptied the accounts that gave him pride. I removed his claim to the family name I carried with dignity. I gave my wealth, my home, and my legacy to people who respected me, to charities, to neighbors, to relatives who showed kindness. My son was left with nothing. No money, no inheritance, no name, no future. The world he mocked me from collapsed around him. And me? I walked forward with peace. For the first time in many years, I could breathe freely. I could eat without shame. I could rest without fear of insults. I had justice, and justice gave me dignity. My days grew quiet, but they were filled with calm. I no longer carried the weight of humiliation. I no longer felt the sting of his laughter. That chapter of my life was closed. But the image of those 42 missed calls still remains in my mind. Each call was a cry. Each silence was my answer. He begged, but I did not respond. He pleaded, but I did not bend. Because I remembered the moment he shoved me into the dirt and laughed. That memory was stronger than any apology he could give. That moment was proof that he had killed the bond between us. And once a bond is broken like that, it cannot be rebuilt. Justice, to me, was not about hurting him back. It was about showing him the truth, that cruelty carries consequences. He thought he had power because he was young, because I was old. But he forgot that the old man in the dirt was still the man who held his future in his hands. And with one decision, one pen, one silence, I took that future away. I live now with no regrets. I gave him everything when he was a child, and when he grew into cruelty, I took it all back. My story is not of weakness, but of strength, found in the final chapter of my life. And if anyone asks me what justice looks like, I tell them it looks like peace after pain, dignity after shame, and silence after cruelty. Final thought. He pushed me into the dirt and laughed, so I cut him out, and left him begging with 42 calls.